Marc Edwards. He's a professor at Virginia Tech, and he will be talking to us about how some of his longtime work in water can be applied to environmental justice in the current COVID pandemic. So without further ado, take it away, Marc.
Well, thank you, Kim, and I just appreciate this opportunity to provide some perspectives on engineering ethics and citizen science in underserved communities. And these are based on experiences of the Virginia Tech U.S. Water Study team over the last 15 years, both pre and now post-COVID. And when we started on this journey about 15 years ago, I realized there were some mega trends that we needed to address. Next slide. And across society, that included the fact that in the US, water is not a human right. You get the water that you can afford. That we were starting to live in a post-truth world, and we're observing declining public trust, and all across the world and in the US, we had out of control debt and shrinking cities and towns. And within academia and even AESP, we have a climate change of hyper competition and perverse incentives and an oversupply of PhDs for jobs. And we also have a top-down grand challenge funding model, which is good for solving grand challenges, but not so good for solving day-to-day problems, practical problems that our communities are facing. And now post-COVID, if you can advance, we're continuing to see increasing or declining public trust and just spiraling out of control debt, which places communities and towns in impossible financial situations. One element of what we do is training. Next slide. And so students in our program who choose to do this as a hobby, they take a class, Engineering Ethics in the Public, which was originally co-designed by myself and Dr. Yana Lombrinidou. We are continually engaged in case studies in vulnerable communities and dealing with crazy unfolding ethical dilemmas that just boggle the mind. And on this journey, we engage in a lot of personal reflection and introspecting as to what our role is exactly in society as scientists, engineers. And for students involved in this, they do a lot of thought about public storytelling and documentaries. And if you want to see examples of that recently from our group, I'd be happy to provide you with links. Next slide. Practically, our work in communities has been relevant. We exposed environmental crimes occurring in Flint, Michigan, which resulted in a federal emergency declaration and elevated the profile of citizen science, both for Flint resident Leanne Walters and others, but across society as a whole. And to date, Flint itself has received more than $1 billion of relief. And we've also had very high profile successes in many other communities, just as a couple examples. Next, St. Joe, Louisiana, where Adrienne Kantner worked, and we worked with her to expose a lead problem there, which resulted in declaration of a public health emergency and mobilization of millions of dollars in relief. And next, recently we exposed a problem with illegal pesticide dosing to the water of Denmark, South Carolina, because they couldn't afford to do the cheapest legal alternative to controlling their problems. And next, and there's been many, many other successes, but for every success, there's 90–95% of the communities we work with, we simply expose that they have really bad and expensive water, and nothing illegal is actually happening. Next slide. So with that, post-COVID, what we're realizing is the future is unfortunately very much in need of this kind of work, because Flint, Denmark, St. Joe were ahead of the curve in terms of going bankrupt, and their past is the future of many of our cities and towns. And many of us are following in the footsteps of result of COVID and financial and emotional stress. And so we're going to continue applying our bottom-up science model that seeks and speaks truth, that usually in communities only finds that they have very expensive and crappy water, but every now and then we do expose some unethical or criminal behavior, and that's very, very disconcerting. We judge our success by, first, the quality of the science that we do. Secondly, the problems that we've solved and exposed in these communities underserved by science. We've calculated that our work has directly or indirectly led to over $5 billion of relief to date to these communities. And it's put a spotlight on infrastructure inequality, engineering ethics, and it's given us all a sense of purpose, which is useful in today's world, and both for us and our citizen science collaborators. So with that, thank you.